Welcome, everyone, to TechDaily.ai. I'm your host, David, and I'm joined today by our guest, Sophia. You can sponsor this podcast for just $25. Your message will be featured across major platforms like Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and more. If you're interested, visit TechDaily.ai to get started today.
It is definitely a great opportunity for anyone listening, honestly.
It really is. So let us jump right in. What if I told you that an $850 billion tech empire could be completely dismantled, like just because of a $44 million charitable donation made a decade ago?
I mean, it sounds like a movie plot, but it is literally happening right now in a federal courthouse in Oakland, California.
Exactly. We are looking at this explosive trial between Elon Musk and OpenAI. And the goal today, for you listening, is to kind of strip away all that billionaire drama.
Yeah, we really want to look at the actual structural mechanics of what is happening under the hood. Because at its core, this is basically a massive stress test of the legal boundaries of corporate America.
Yeah. Right. The big question you need to keep in mind as we talk about this fallout is simply this. Can a nonprofit organization legally transform itself into an $850 billion for-profit titan without breaking the law?
It is a staggering legal question. To really grasp how absurd the situation is, you just have to look at the math the jury is being presented with.
Oh, the numbers are just wild.
They really are. You have that initial $44 million philanthropic donation sitting on one side of the scale, and then, an $850 billion commercial valuation sitting on the other. It illustrates a complete metamorphosis.
And that tension was super obvious during the second week of the trial, right?
Yeah.
Especially when Greg Brossman took the stand on May 5th.
Oh, absolutely. Brockman is the co-founder and former president of the organization, and he had to state for the public record that his personal financial stake in this former nonprofit is now worth nearly $30 billion.
Wait. $30 billion.
Yeah.
For an executive at an organization that started as a public charity, that is just mind-blowing.
Right. And what stood out from the courtroom reporting wasn't just the sheer scale of the wealth itself. It was the internal documentation Musk's legal team used to attack that wealth.
Oh, yeah. They brought out the receipts. They didn't just point to bank accounts. They actually brought in Brockman's private journal from 2017.
Which is, an incredibly rare look into the unvarnished thoughts of a tech founder navigating a massive pivot. Musk's lawyer, Mark Toberoff, literally read Brockman's own handwritten thoughts back to him in court.
That had to be so uncomfortable.
Highly uncomfortable. In one entry, Brockman was calculating his financial future, explicitly asking himself, quote, "Financially, what will take me to $1 billion?
Wow. Not a great look for a nonprofit leader.
No, it is not. And in another entry from that same time period, he admitted that restructuring the organization without Musk's involvement would be, in his own words, morally bankrupt.
But he tried to defend that on the stand, right? Like, contextualize it.
Yeah, he argued these were just fleeting moments of frustration from years ago, not formal declarations of some corporate conspiracy.
Still, when you are sitting before a jury trying to prove that your shift from a public charity to a massive commercial enterprise was purely out of necessity, having a diary entry where you plot your path to $1 billion really undercuts the altruistic narrative.
It definitely paints a picture of premeditated financial ambition. But, the plaintiff didn't exactly walk away unscathed either.
Oh, definitely not. Musk spent 3 days on the stand leaning very heavily into the persona of the betrayed benefactor. He told the jury he felt like a fool for donating that initial $44 million.
Right. He claimed he genuinely believed it was going to remain a nonprofit dedicated to the benefit of humanity, but the defense attorneys managed to expose a massive contradiction in his stance.
And this is where the courtroom literally gasped, right?
Yes. Under cross-examination, they pushed him on the operations of his own current artificial intelligence venture, xAI, and Musk was forced to concede on the stand that xAI partly distills OpenAI's models to build its own technology.
I should probably pause and explain the mechanics of what distilling actually means here, because it completely shifts the motive of the lawsuit.
Go for it. Yeah, it is super important context.
So when you are training a massive AI model, the computationally expensive part, the part that costs billions in specialized chips and electricity, is the initial learning phase.
Right, the heavy lifting.
Exactly. Distillation is when a competing company takes the highly refined, finished outputs of that massive model and uses them as a shortcut to train their own smaller, cheaper models. So Musk is essentially admitting that his own supposedly rival company is using OpenAI's expensive homework to catch up.
Which forces the jury to evaluate his true intentions, right? Is he spending millions on lawyers to protect a noble charitable mission from 2015? Or is he just utilizing the federal court system to financially hamstring his biggest competitor?
The competitor whose underlying technology he actually relies on to build his own products.
Exactly. It reframes the entire trial from a moral crusade to just a strategic, anti-competitive weapon.
Totally. It is like donating money to build a free public park and coming back years later to find a luxury shopping mall there.
Yeah.
But the narrative isn't actually that simple when you look at the history of how this transformation happened.
No, it wasn't an overnight heist. It was a very slow, methodical, structural drift. We really have to start at the foundation in late 2015.
Right, when the organization was legally established as a 501c3 nonprofit.
The charter language was absolute back then. It was dedicated to developing open source technology for the public benefit. And crucially, it included a binding clause stating it was not organized for the private gain of any person.
Just a completely standard philanthropic structure. Musk puts his money in, they hire researchers, and the goal is to build safe AI for everyone. But the first real fracture happens in 2018.
Yeah, that is when Musk leaves the board entirely. He had tried and failed to convince the others to merge the nonprofit into Tesla.
And his departure left a massive funding vacuum, right? Which is what triggers the first major structural mutation the very next year. In 2019, they created what they called a capped profit subsidiary underneath the nonprofit umbrella.
Right. They realized they needed a commercial engine to generate billions of dollars in cash to buy computing power. But to keep the nonprofit legally in charge, they installed a financial governor on that engine, the cap.
So they could tell investors, like, you will get a return on your money, but only up to a strictly defined multiple. Once you hit that cap, all the excess pressure, all the profit diverts back to the nonprofit mission. Is that how they justified it to regulators?
Yes, the justification was purely mathematical survival. The board argued that building artificial general intelligence required an astronomical burn rate.
Because a traditional charity relying on galas and philanthropic grants simply cannot buy tens of thousands of specialized microchips.
Exactly. They needed Wall Street capital, and Wall Street capital demands a return on investment. The capped profit model was their attempt to thread the needle between a duty to humanity and the reality of venture capital.
And it worked, at least financially. They cracked the door open to private money, and in 2022, ChatGPT launches, changes the world, and Microsoft pours $10 billion through that open door.
They went from a niche research lab to the center of the global economy almost overnight, leading to the ultimate transformation in October of 2025.
Right, because the capped profit structure became too unwieldy for their massive scale. So they executed a full conversion into a public benefit corporation, or a PBC.
Let's define what a public benefit corporation actually does, because this is where the legal shield comes in.
Yeah, because a traditional corporation has a strict fiduciary duty to maximize shareholder value above all else. Like, if the CEO intentionally hurts profits to help society, the shareholders can sue them.
But a PBC changes that legal DNA. It creates a legal safe harbor. The board of directors is legally permitted and actually required to balance the financial interests of their shareholders with a specific stated public benefit.
So it shields the executives from shareholder lawsuits if they decide to prioritize safety or public access over quarterly revenue.
Yeah.
But they still had to get this conversion approved by state regulators, right?
Yes, specifically California Attorney General Rob Bonta.
Why would the state agree to let a public charity just hand over control of a world-changing technology to private investors?
Because of the payout structure. When the conversion happened, the original nonprofit entity didn't just disappear. It walked away retaining a 26% ownership stake in the new public benefit corporation.
And in monetary terms, that stake is worth roughly $130 billion.
Exactly. The regulators likely viewed this not as a theft of public assets, but as an incredibly successful endowment. The charity turned a few $1 million of early donations into a $130 billion war chest to fund its mission.
I mean, I see the pragmatism there. You can look at this timeline and call it a calculated bait and switch. But the counter-argument is that it is simply impossible to build capital-intensive, world-altering tech on a base sale budget.
Which naturally bridges to the specific legal claims Musk is using to try and tear this entire apparatus down today.
Right, because out of 26 initial claims, the judge only allowed 2 to proceed to trial: breach of charitable trust and unjust enrichment.
And the remedies he is demanding under those claims are apocalyptic for the company. He is asking the federal court to strip Sam Altman and Greg Brockman of their leadership positions entirely.
He also wants the 2025 corporate conversion completely reversed, right?
Yes. Most aggressively, he is demanding the court force the return of up to $134 billion in value back to the original nonprofit foundation. He is trying to force the genie back into a very small, underfunded bottle.
And he insists he's doing this purely as a rescue mission for the original 2015 ideal with zero personal financial gain in mind.
But the defense strategy, led by attorney William Savitt, is dismantling that altruistic framing. Savitt introduced internal documents proving that back in 2017 and 2018, Musk was actually the one advocating for the organization to transition into a for-profit entity.
Oh, wow. So he was fine with it back then.
The caveat, which Savitt highlighted brilliantly, was control. Musk was perfectly comfortable with a commercial for-profit structure, provided he was the one in charge.
Ah, I see. Once he lost the internal power struggle and left the board, his commitment to the strict nonprofit ideals suddenly reemerged.
It really exposes the dispute as a classic corporate power struggle dressed up in the language of moral philosophy.
But setting the hypocrisy aside, the actual legal hurdles the jury and Judge Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers have to clear are fascinating. The entire case basically hinges on what legal scholars call the trust versus gift dilemma.
Yes, the trust versus gift dilemma is crucial.
I'm assuming this comes down to strings attached. Like, if I give you $20 as a pure gift, I might be annoyed if you buy tacos instead of the pizza we talked about, but I have no legal right to sue you. The money is yours.
Right.
But if we establish a formal trust, I am legally binding you to only use that money for pizza.
So is OpenAI arguing that Musk simply handed them a string-free gift?
That is the core of their defense. The court must determine the specific legal classification of that original $44 million.
Because if it constituted a legally enforceable charitable trust, then the executives had unyielding fiduciary duties to adhere to the 2015 mission statement.
Exactly. But OpenAI's lawyers are pointing out that while the early charter used grand language about the public benefit, the founders never actually established a formal, legally binding trust structure with the donors.
So if the court agrees those funds were legally just unrestricted gifts, Musk's standing to dictate the company's future direction essentially evaporates. They could win this existential battle on a foundational technicality. And they have a second major defensive strategy running parallel to that, the statute of limitations.
Oh, right. Microsoft is driving this particular argument as a co-defendant, correct?
Yes. Their legal team surfaced a public social media post Musk made back in 2020. In that post, he complained that the organization had been, quote, essentially captured by Microsoft.
Wait, 4 years before he actually filed the lawsuit?
Which is a massive problem for his legal team. The defense's argument is simple. If you publicly acknowledge that the organization was operating as a captured commercial entity in 2020, you had an obligation to file your grievances then.
Yeah, you cannot sit and watch a company build hundreds of billions of dollars in value over 4 years and only sue when it reaches peak profitability.
If the judge accepts that timeline, the entire case could be dismissed simply because Musk slept on his rights.
The strategic maneuvering is intense, but the interpersonal hostility is honestly quite chilling. Just days before the jury selection process even started, Musk sent a text message directly to Greg Brockman.
Oh, the text message, yeah. Brockman had suggested they just drop the competing claims and walk away.
And Musk replied with a dark, explicit threat, telling him that if they didn't surrender, by the end of the week, Brockman and Sam Altman would be, quote, the most hated men in America.
It reveals how multifaceted this attack really is. The courtroom is just one battlefield. He is simultaneously weaponizing the media, public perception, and his own massive social platforms to apply crushing personal pressure on the executives.
For anyone listening right now, you might be wondering why you should care about a bitter text exchange or a debate over corporate charter technicalities in Oakland. Like, how does this affect someone who uses technology at work or has a retirement account tied to the market?
Because the financial blast radius of this trial extends far beyond one company, we are looking at a massive investment domino effect.
Right. If Judge Gonzalez-Rogers ultimately rules that the 2025 conversion into a public benefit corporation was fundamentally unlawful, it doesn't just reset one corporate structure.
No, it could instantly invalidate or unsettle tens of billions of dollars in active legal and financial commitments, We are talking about massive supply chain and infrastructure contracts involving titans like Microsoft, Amazon, SoftBank, and NVIDIA.
It would trigger an earthquake across the entire tech sector. Joint ventures would be frozen, intellectual property rights would be thrown into chaos, and future product integrations would just hit a brick wall.
And the brutal reality of capitalism is that when an apex predator stumbles, the ecosystem reorganizes immediately.
So if this trial dismantles the current market leader, or even just distracts their engineering teams for the next 2 years with injunctions and appeals, the competitive landscape shifts overnight. Who actually wins if the leader falls?
The most immediate beneficiary would be Anthropic. They are the other major player in the foundation model space. But Anthropic had incredible foresight.
They structure themselves as a public benefit corporation from the very beginning, right?
Exactly. They don't have the legal baggage of a messy, decade-long transition from a nonprofit. They can simply continue shipping products and signing enterprise contracts while their main rival is paralyzed in federal court.
They get to cruise right past the wreckage. And the other undeniable winner in this scenario is the plaintiff himself.
Elon Musk's own venture, xAI, stands to gain immense market share. Keep in mind, xAI was recently folded into the SpaceX corporate umbrella, which boasts a reported valuation of $250 billion.
So if the momentum of the current industry leader is broken by a court order, a $250 billion competitor led by the man who filed the lawsuit is perfectly positioned to absorb that demand.
It is a stunning dynamic. He has managed to position himself as the moral crusader fighting for the public good, while simultaneously using the legal system to clear the commercial path for his own massive enterprise.
But stepping back from the immediate winners and losers, there is a much deeper structural warning embedded in this trial that the entire technology sector has to face.
The foundational governance of AI companies is incredibly fragile. We are watching a single spurned donor, using his immense wealth, successfully drag an $850 billion corporation into a fight for its life over its foundational paperwork.
This is a company that had its complex transition reviewed and approved by state regulators, and it is still vulnerable.
It sends a chilling message to the broader market. No organization with a quirky, idealistic corporate history is safe from this kind of systemic challenge.
The governance frameworks designed a decade ago were built for research labs and philanthropic grants. They were never engineered to withstand the gravitational pull of trillion-dollar market caps, or the necessity of massive data centers.
Or the intense, cutthroat scrutiny of rival billionaires. The tension between public benefit ideals and the crushing reality of private capital is no longer theoretical. It is currently on trial.
And regardless of whether the jury sides with the plaintiff or the defense, that underlying tension cannot be ignored by anyone building in this space going forward.
It requires a complete rethinking of how we structure the entities building our future.
We have traced a truly wild trajectory today, starting from a $44 million charitable donation meant to safeguard humanity, all the way to an existential legal war over the architecture of modern capitalism.
We have looked at private journals, plotting path to $1 billion, admissions of utilizing a competitor's technology, and the legal mechanics of pressure valve subsidiaries and public benefit corporations.
It represents a turning point in how society balances technological progress with corporate accountability, which leaves us with a final, vital question for you to consider.
Yeah, this is the big one.
We have explored how the astronomical cost of computing power fundamentally broke the traditional nonprofit model. If creating cutting-edge, world-altering artificial intelligence inherently will require so much capital that it shatters philanthropic structures, how can society ever guarantee that humanity's most powerful future technologies won't always inevitably be controlled by a handful of profit-driven giants?
It is the defining question of this technological era. If the entities designed to protect the public good always run out of money, who ultimately gets to write the code for our future?
Exactly. It is something we all need to pay attention to. Thank you so much for joining the conversation today on TechDaily.ai. We will see you next time.